I keep a spare toothbrush in my glove box and 3 car seats in my back seat, even though I have 0 children of my own, for 5 years. I have been the invisible safety net catching my sister's chaotic life, paying bills I never saw, and soothing tantrums I did not cause. But when Tessa tapped her fork against her glass at Sunday dinner and beamed, announcing baby number 6 was coming, I realized the net was about to break. My desk at Alder Creek Mutual was a sanctuary of beige silence. It was a corner cubicle on the 3rd floor, overlooking a parking lot that remained steadfastly gray regardless of the season. I liked the gray. I liked the silence. I liked the predictable columns of actuarial data on my dual monitors, where risk could be calculated, managed, and insured against. In my professional life, surprise was the enemy. If a number did not balance, I hunted it down until it confessed its error. I was good at this. I was steady. I was Ruby Foster, the woman who never missed a deadline, never forgot a birthday, and never left a coffee mug in the sink. But at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the vibration of my phone against the desktop shattered the peace. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. My stomach gave a familiar, acidic lurch, a physical rejection of the inevitable. I looked anyway. Tessa. Stuck at appointment. Can you grab kids from school? Just this once? You're a lifesaver. Love you. I stared at the text. The phrase "just this once" was the most heavily abused sequence of words in the English language, at least within the Foster family. I looked at the time. I had a report due for the regional manager by 5. If I left now, I would have to finish it at home, late tonight, after I had fed 5 children who were not mine and navigated the emotional minefield of my sister's gratitude, which always felt strangely like a command. I typed back, "I am at work. Tessa, I have a meeting." The response came 3 seconds later. "Please, Rubes. Mom isn't answering. Leo is waiting outside, and you know he gets scared." She played the Leo card. She always played the Leo card because she knew I had a soft spot for her middle son, a quiet 7-year-old with anxious eyes who looked too much like me. I sighed. The sound loud in the quiet office. I saved my spreadsheet. I packed my bag. I walked out to my car. A sensible sedan that smelled perpetually of stale apple juice and wet wipes. Despite the fact that I lived alone and had no children, my car was a museum of other people's chaos. In the glove compartment, nestled next to the tire gauge, were 3 spare toothbrushes still in their wrappers. In the trunk, under a blanket, were 2 booster seats and a collapsible stroller. In the center console, I kept a stash of granola bars, not because I liked them, but because hunger meltdowns in the back seat were a sonic weapon I had learned to disarm preemptively. I pulled into the pickup line at Briar Glen Elementary, joining the idling queue of minivans. I was 32 years old. I had a degree in finance. I had a retirement account I contributed to religiously. And yet, here I was, the phantom parent, the backup generator that kicked in whenever the main power grid of my sister's life flickered and failed. When Leo climbed into the back seat, dragging his backpack, he didn't look surprised to see me. That was the part that hurt the most. He just buckled his seatbelt and looked out the window. "Hey, buddy," I said, watching him in the rearview mirror. "Mom got stuck at an appointment." "Okay," he said. He didn't ask what kind of appointment. He didn't ask when she would be back. He was 7, and he had already learned that schedules in his house were suggestions, not promises. We picked up the others from their various scattered locations. Mia from the middle school, the twins from the daycare center that charged a late fee for every minute past 5, and finally the toddler, Chloe, from a neighbor's house where Tessa had dropped her off that morning, by the time I had all 5 of them secured in the vehicle. The air was thick with the smell of sweaty gym clothes and the high-pitched static of arguing siblings. I drove them to my mother's house. Tonight was the monthly family dinner, a tradition Marlene Foster enforced with the rigidity of a military dictator. Attendance was mandatory. Excuses were treason. My mother lived in a sprawling, slightly drafty house that had been too big for her since Dad died 10 years ago. As I herded the pack of children up the front walk, the door swung open. Marlene stood there, wiping her hands on a floral apron, her hair perfectly coiffed, her smile tight. "There they are," she cried, opening her arms as the kids surged past her like a breaking wave. She looked at me, her smile dimming by a fraction. "You look tired." "Ruby, you work too hard. I just drove across town in rush hour to pick up 5 kids." "Mom," I said, stepping inside and dropping my keys in the bowl. "Well, that is what family does," she said, turning back to the kitchen. "We pitch in. Tessa is going through a lot right now." Tessa was always going through a lot. That was her permanent state of being. She was a hurricane that viewed herself as a victim of the weather. I went into the kitchen to help. I chopped vegetables. I set the table for 9 people. I poured juice. I separated the twins when they started hitting each other with placemats. I did all of this with the muscle memory of a veteran soldier. Tessa arrived 40 minutes late. She swept into the room bringing a gust of cold air and dramatic energy. She looked radiant, in that frantic, flushed way she always did when she was about to ask for something, or when she had done something impulsive. Her hair was windblown, her cheeks pink. She wasn't wearing a coat, just a heavy knit sweater that hung loosely around her frame. Sorry everyone. The traffic was a nightmare. And I had to stop for gas," she announced, kissing Mom on the cheek and waving vaguely at the children. She sat down at the head of the table, displacing the spot where I usually sat. I moved to the side, next to Leo. We began to eat. The noise level was deafening. My mother asked questions about school that the kids answered in monosyllables. Tessa spent most of the meal texting under the table, her thumb flying across the screen, a small, secret smile playing on her lips. I watched her. I knew that look. It was the look of a gambler who had just put everything on red and was waiting for the wheel to stop spinning. Halfway through the pot roast, Tessa picked up her water glass. She tapped it with her fork. The sharp ting-ting-ting cut through the chatter. "Hey guys," she said. Her voice was bright, too bright. "Listen up. I have some news." The table went quiet. Even the twins stopped chewing. Tessa looked around the table, making eye contact with everyone except me. She took a deep breath, placing a hand dramatically over her stomach. "I know things have been crazy lately," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion, "but I really feel like the universe is finally turning a corner for us. I wanted you all to be the first to know. We are going to have a new addition to the team." She paused for effect. "I am pregnant." For 3 seconds. The only sound in the room was the hum of the refrigerator. My stomach did not just drop. It disintegrated. I felt a cold numbness spread from my chest to my fingertips. I looked at the 5 children sitting around the table. Mia, who was 13 and wearing the same jeans for the 3rd day in a row because the washing machine at Tessa's rental was broken. The twins, who needed speech therapy that Tessa kept rescheduling. Leo, who was staring at his plate. Chloe, who was still in diapers that I bought in bulk at Costco. 5. There were 5 of them, and she was announcing a 6th. My mother was the first to react. She let out a gasp of delight, clapping her hands together. "Oh, Tessa! A baby! A new baby!" Marlene got up and hugged Tessa, who beamed, basking in the adoration. The kids looked confused. Mia rolled her eyes and slumped lower in her chair. I sat frozen. I forced the muscles in my face to construct a smile. It felt like a mask made of dried clay, ready to crack. "Congratulations," I said. The word tasted like ash. Internally, my mind was racing backward, flashing through the last 5 years like a horror movie reel. I remembered the year Tessa had lost her lease, and I had let them stay in my 2-bedroom apartment just until things settle. It had lasted 14 months. I remembered sleeping on my own sofa while toddlers destroyed my books. I remembered the nights I sat up with a sick infant because Tessa was too exhausted to function. I remembered the thousands of dollars disguised as loans that were never repaid. "Who is the father?" Mia asked. Her voice was flat, cutting through my mother's cooing. Tessa's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A tightness appeared in her jaw. A subtle clench I knew well. "His name is Mark," Tessa said, lifting her chin. "And he is wonderful. He is very serious about us." Mia, this is a fresh start. A real family unit. Mark. I had never heard of a Mark. 2 weeks ago, the love of her life had been a guy named Jason who sold solar panels. When is he due? I asked. I tried to keep my voice neutral, but the actuary in me was already calculating the timeline. August, Tessa said. That meant she was barely 2 months along. She was announcing a pregnancy to her children and her mother based on a relationship that was likely measured in weeks. I looked at my mother. Marlene was weeping softly, holding Tessa's hand. She loved babies. She loved the idea of babies. She loved the vague, sentimental concept of a large, bustling family. She did not love the logistics. She did not love the diaper rash or the tuition bills or the court dates for child support. She loved the highlight reel, and she left the raw footage for me to edit. We need to celebrate, Marlene declared. Ruby, go get that sparkling cider from the pantry. I stood up. My legs felt heavy. I walked to the pantry, retrieved the bottle, and came back. I poured the drinks. I raised my glass. I toasted to the new baby. I was a ghost in my own body, watching myself perform the role of the supportive sister. After dinner, the chaos migrated to the living room. The TV was turned on, and the kids sprawled out on the rug. Marlene was in the kitchen, cutting a pie. I found Tessa on the back porch. She was smoking a cigarette, blowing the smoke away from the house into the cold night air. I stepped outside and closed the sliding glass door behind me. You are smoking, I said. It is just one, Tessa snapped, dropping the cigarette and crushing it under her boot. Don't start. Ruby, I am barely inhaling. I crossed my arms, hugging myself against the chill. Tessa, we need to talk. Not now, she said, waving a hand. I am celebrating. Can't you just be happy for me? For once? I am happy if you are happy. I lied. But Tessa, 6 kids. Have you thought about the logistics? Where is the baby going to sleep? Your lease is up in May. Does Mark have a place? Tessa rolled her eyes. Mark is looking for a place for all of us. He is in construction. He makes good money. Does he know about the other 5? I asked. The question hung in the air, sharp and necessary. Of course he knows, Tessa shouted. Her voice cracked. Why do you always do this? Why do you always have to make it about money and logistics? You drain the joy out of everything. Ruby, you are like a black hole of practicality. I am the one who pays for the practicality. Tessa, I hissed, keeping my voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. I paid for the twins' dental work last month. I paid the car insurance you let lapse. I am not trying to be mean. I am trying to understand how this works. It works because we are a family, she yelled. We figure it out. That is what families do. She pushed past me, shoulder-checking me as she went for the door. I need air, she muttered, despite having been standing in the fresh air for 10 minutes. I am going to the bathroom. You get the kids in the car. I can't deal with your energy right now. She slammed the sliding door, leaving me alone on the porch. I stood there for a full minute, looking at the dark outline of the oak tree in the backyard. I was shaking, not from the cold, but from a rage so hot and dense it felt like it was melting my ribs. Get the kids in the car. The command. The assumption. The default setting. I went back inside. Tessa had locked herself in the downstairs bathroom. I could hear the water running. Marlene was sitting in her armchair, oblivious, knitting something pink. Mom, I said, I'm going to load the kids up. Tessa isn't feeling well. Marlene looked up, her face softening into a beatific expression of pity. Poor thing. Morning sickness. You're such a good sister. Ruby, I rounded up the children. It took 20 minutes. Shoes were missing. Coats were zipped wrong. Chloe was crying because she wanted more pie. I carried the toddler out to Tessa's minivan, which was parked crookedly in the driveway. I buckled her in. I checked the other seatbelts. When I came back in, Tessa was finally emerging from the bathroom. She looked red-eyed, but she had reapplied her lipstick. Ready? She asked, breezing past me without making eye contact. I grabbed her arm, gently, but firmly. Tessa, I said, we need to have a real meeting about this. Next week, with a calendar. She pulled her arm away, Stop trying to control my life. Ruby, you're not their mother. The words landed like a slap. I watched her walk out to the van, get in the driver's seat, and drive away. She didn't wave. I turned to say goodbye to my mother. Marlene was standing in the hallway, her arms crossed. You were hard on her, Marlene said. I stared at my mother. I just asked a question. Mom, she is fragile. Ruby, you know that. She needs support right now, not an interrogation. Those kids adore you. They look up to you. Don't punish them just because you are stressed about your job. I felt the blood drain from my face. Because I am stressed about my job? I am not punishing them. I said, my voice trembling. I love them. I am the one who picks them up. I am the one who buys the toothbrushes. And we appreciate it, Marlene said, dismissing my pain with a wave of her hand. But family is sacrifice. Ruby, when you have kids of your own someday, you'll understand. Until then, try to have a little more grace. She kissed my cheek, a dry, pecking sensation, and closed the door. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time before I turned the key. The silence in my car was usually my favorite thing. Tonight, it felt heavy. It felt like a coffin. When you have kids of your own, my mother used that line like a bludgeon. It was a way of invalidating every hour of labor, every dollar spent, every tear wiped away. Because I had not biologically birthed them. My suffering did not count. My exhaustion was theoretical. My role was service without status. I drove home. My apartment was in a quiet complex called The Willows. It was clean. It was organized. It was mine. I walked inside and locked the door. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the entry. Baby number 6. I kicked off my heels. I went into my small home office, a room I kept meticulously organized. I needed to see it. I needed to see proof that I had control over something. I opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. This was where I kept the family paperwork. Not my paperwork. Theirs. The copies of birth certificates I needed for school registration because Tessa lost the originals. The vaccination records. The receipts for the loans. I pulled out a manila folder labeled Emergency Papers. I opened it. On top was a document I had signed 3 years ago. It was during the great crisis of 2023, when Tessa had been hospitalized for exhaustion and dehydration, which turned out to be a reaction to a diet pill, and the father of the twins had threatened to take them across state lines. It was a temporary guardianship authorization. I remembered signing it in the hospital waiting room. The notary had been there. The social worker had looked relieved. It was supposed to be for 90 days. Just to give me legal standing to pick them up from school and sign for medical care while Tessa recovered. I looked at the date. It was 3 years old. I scanned the text. My eyes caught a clause I hadn't fully processed in the panic of that night. Shall remain in full force and effect until revoked in writing by the grantor or by court order. It hadn't expired. It didn't have an end date. I stared at the paper. For 3 years. I had been operating under the assumption that I was just a helpful aunt. But legally, this document suggested I had voluntarily stepped into a role that Tessa and the school district and the doctors were all too happy to let me keep. I had signed my own sentence. I thought about the text message. You're a lifesaver. I thought about Tessa's face when she said, you're not their mother. I thought about Marlene saying, don't punish them. They had built a life on my back. They had hollowed me out and used my shell to shelter themselves. And then they criticized me for not being soft enough on the inside. I closed the folder. I didn't cry. I had cried enough over the last 5 years. Crying implied I was sad. I wasn't sad anymore. I was something else. I was cold. I was clear. I walked to my desk and opened a fresh notebook. It was a Leuchtturm 1917. Hardcover, black. I uncapped my favorite pen. I didn't write a list of grievances. I didn't write a letter to Tessa that I would never send. I wrote a contract with myself. I pressed the pen into the paper so hard it embossed the page underneath. I am done being the default. I stared at the words. They looked like a promise. They looked like the beginning of a war. I closed the notebook. I turned off the light. Tomorrow. I would not be a lifesaver. Tomorrow, I would be a sister. And there was going to be a terrible, necessary difference. I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth. I looked at the reflection in the mirror. Same brown eyes, same tired lines around the mouth. But something had shifted behind the eyes. Tessa wanted a fresh start? Fine. I was going to give her one. But she wasn't going to like it. I went to bed, and for the first time in years, I didn't check my phone to see if anyone needed me before I closed my eyes. The silence in the room wasn't heavy anymore. It was waiting. The reception area of Larkins Halloway Legal Group smelled of lemon oil and expensive coffee. It was a sterile, hushed environment, the kind of place where people spoke in low tones about estates and liabilities. I sat on a stiff leather chair. Clutching my folder, I felt like an imposter. People came here to divorce billionaires or sue hospitals, not to ask how to resign from being an aunt. Dana Larkins was a sharp woman in her 50s with silver hair cut in a geometric bob and glasses that looked like they cost more than my first car. She sat across from me, reading the document I had pulled from my emergency file the night before. She didn't speak for a long time. She just turned the page, her eyes scanning the legalese. Finally, she took off her glasses and looked at me. "You signed this 3 years ago?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Tessa was in the hospital. The social worker said it was just to let me pick the kids up and sign for emergency medical care if something happened while she was admitted." Dana nodded slowly. She tapped a manicured fingernail on the paper. "The language here is broad. Ruby, very broad. It designates you as a temporary guardian with decision-making power regarding health, education, and welfare. The problem is the definition of temporary. In the state of Illinois, without a specified end date or a revocation clause that triggers automatically. This document lives until you kill it." She leaned forward. "But the document is the least of your problems. The real issue is the precedent of conduct." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means the law looks at paper, but it also looks at practice." Dana said, "You have been picking these children up from school. You have been taking them to doctors. You have been paying for their dental work. In the eyes of the school district and the medical providers, you are not just a helpful aunt, you are a co-parent. You have established a status called in loco parentis. You stand in the place of the parent." I felt a cold sweat prickle along my hairline. "I don't want to take them away," I said quickly. "I love them. I can't be the safety net anymore. I can't be the one they call first. I want to step back, but I am terrified that if I step back, they will fall." Dana softened slightly. She closed the folder. "If you stop cold turkey, it could be seen as abandonment, depending on how deep you are in the system," she said. "If you want to step back safely, you need to do it with surgical precision. You need to paper the trail. You need to prove that the mother is the primary caregiver, and you are merely a secondary support. And you need to revoke this document formally." She pushed a notepad toward me. "Start tracking," she said. "Every dollar, every hour, every request. The difference between a helpful relative and a guardian is often just a matter of who is writing the checks and who is signing the forms. If you want out of the role, you have to stop performing the duties of the role." I left the office with a headache and a bill for $300. It was the best money I had spent in 5 years. That night, I opened a new spreadsheet on my laptop. I called it the ledger. I started going through my bank statements for the last 12 months. It was a forensic audit of my own exploitation. March 3rd. Urgent care copay for Leo, $50. March 10th. Groceries for Tessa. She forgot her wallet. $120. April 4th. School field trip fees for Mia and the twins. $85. April 15th. Venmo to Tessa for gas. $40. The list went on, thousands of dollars. It wasn't the money that made my chest tight. It was the sheer volume of small, frantic emergencies. I wasn't just funding them. I was managing the cash flow of their survival. I looked at my calendar. I cross-referenced the dates. Every time Tessa had a crisis, I had stepped in. And every time I stepped in, The crisis magically resolved until the next one. I wasn't fixing the problem. I was the insulation that prevented Tessa from feeling the cold, hard reality of her own life. Gaslighting is a subtle art. Tessa always told me I was overreacting, or that I loved to control things. But the spreadsheet didn't lie. The numbers were indifferent to emotion. They stared back at me in black and white, a testament to a truth I had been afraid to speak. I was raising these children. I printed the spreadsheet. I didn't print it to wave in her face. I printed it to steady my own hands. 2 days later, I texted Tessa, "Meet me at the daily grind. Without the kids, we need to talk about the schedule." She arrived 20 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching a venti latte she definitely couldn't afford. She looked tired, but she also looked defensive. She sat down and immediately checked her phone. "Make it quick." "Rubes," she said. "I have to pick up the twins in an hour. Mark is looking at a rental property for us later." I didn't ask about Mark. I didn't ask about the pregnancy. I kept my eyes on my notebook. "I have a proposal," I said. Tessa sighed, blowing air through her lips. "Oh God, is this about the dinner? Mom said you were sulking." "I am not sulking," I said, keeping my voice even. "I am planning. Here is the reality. Tessa, I cannot be the on-call parent anymore. I have a job. I have a life. And I am burning out." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. "However," I said, "I am not going to leave you stranded. I have done some research. The Briar Glen Youth Club has an after-school program. It runs until 6 in the evening. They help with homework. They give them a snack. It is licensed and safe." Tessa scrunched up her nose. "The youth club? That place smells like gym socks, and it costs money." "Ruby, money I do not have. I know," I said. "That is why I am making an offer. I will pay for the first 3 months of the program for Mia, Leo, and the twins. I will cover the cost entirely. That handles your afternoons 5 days a week." Tessa blinked. She looked suspicious. "What is the catch?" "The catch is that you have to sign them up," I said. "You have to fill out the paperwork. You have to be the primary contact. And in exchange for me paying for this, I am stepping back from emergency pickups. I will take the kids on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. That is it. 2 fixed days. If you need help on Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, they will be at the youth club. If you are late, the youth club charges a fee. And that fee will be on you." Tessa stared at me. Her mouth fell open slightly. "You're firing us," she said. Her voice was quiet, shocked. "I am not firing you," I said. "I am resigning from a job I never applied for. This is a good deal. Tessa, professional childcare, paid for. You just have to manage the logistics." She slammed her hand on the table. The latte sloshed over the rim. "You think you can just throw money at this?" she hissed. "You think you can just buy your way out of being a sister? They are family. Ruby, they aren't employees you can manage with a spreadsheet. I am trying to give you stability." I said, "You are trying to control me," she shouted. People in the coffee shop turned to look. "You are jealous because I'm having a baby and you are alone with your cats and your money. You want to punish me for having a life. I don't have cats," I said calmly, "and I am not punishing you. I am setting a boundary. Tuesday and Thursday. That is what I can give. Keep your money." Tessa spat. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I don't need your charity. We will be fine. We don't need someone who treats family like a transaction." She stormed out. I watched her go. I didn't chase her. I didn't feel guilty. I felt a strange, vibrating clarity. She had said no. I had offered a lifeline, and she had slapped it away because it came with strings of accountability. The backlash was immediate and digital. That evening, as I was heating up leftover soup, my phone pinged, a Facebook notification. Tessa had posted a status update. It was a black background with white text, the universal signal for passive-aggressive drama. It is funny how the people who have the most always give the least. Sad to realize that some people will only love your kids if it is convenient for their schedule. Hug your babies tight tonight. Mamas, you never know who is going to abandon your village when things get real. It had 12 likes in 10 minutes. Then came the texts. My Aunt Linda, who lived in Florida and hadn't seen the kids in 4 years, sent a message. Ruby, I saw Tessa's post. I hope you aren't turning your back on those babies. They need their auntie. My cousin Sarah sent, Is everything okay? Tessa sounds really upset. I put my phone on silent. I didn't reply. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post a screenshot of my bank statement. I wanted to post the log of the 300 hours of babysitting I had done in the last year. But I knew it wouldn't matter. In the court of public opinion, the struggling mother is always the saint, and the childless career woman is always the cold-hearted villain. Tessa knew how to weaponize her victimhood. She was a master at it. I let them talk. I sat in my quiet apartment and read a book, but the words swam on the page. I felt sick. I felt like I was being erased and rewritten by a narrator who hated me. 2 days later, I was at work when my desk phone rang. It was an external number. Alder Creek Mutual. This is Ruby Foster. Hello, is this Ruby Foster? A woman's voice asked. Yes, speaking. Hi, Ms. Foster. This is Karen from the billing department at Silver Pines Pediatric Clinic. I am calling regarding the outstanding balance on your account. We sent a notice to your home address, but we haven't received a response. We are getting close to sending this to collections, and I wanted to reach out one last time. I froze. My hand tightened on the receiver. I think you have the wrong person, I said. I don't have any children. I don't have an account with Silver Pines. There was a pause on the line. The sound of typing. Is your date of birth? March 12th, 1994? The woman asked. Yes, I said. And is your address 402 Willow Creek Drive? Apartment 4B? Yes. Well, I have you listed here as the guarantor for, let me see, 5 patients, Mia, Leo, Sophie, Sam, and Chloe Foster. The account was opened 18 months ago. The balance is $420 for unpaid copays and a nebulizer treatment. The room seemed to tilt. 18 months ago, I didn't open that account. I said, my voice sounded very far away. It was opened in person. Ms. Foster, the woman said, her tone cooling slightly. Your social security number was provided, and we have a signature on file. My social security number. I felt a wave of nausea. I knew how she got it. 2 years ago, I had helped Tessa fill out an application for a rental property. I had given her my information to put me down as a reference. She had written it down in her notebook. Can you send me a copy of the signature? I asked. I can email it to you. Yes, but the balance needs to be addressed, or it will affect your credit score. Please send it. I said. I hung up. I sat staring at my computer screen. The numbers on my spreadsheet blurred. This wasn't just borrowing money. This wasn't just leaning on family. This was identity theft. She had opened a medical account in my name because her own credit was shot. She had been taking the kids to the doctor, accumulating debt, and letting the bills go to my address, which she probably intercepted. Or maybe she just threw them away, knowing I would eventually just pay it to save my credit rating, because you have better credit. The email arrived 3 minutes later. I opened the attachment. There it was, a scrawled signature at the bottom of a financial responsibility form. Ruby Foster. But it wasn't my handwriting. The R was looped. I wrote my R with a straight stick. It was Tessa's handwriting, trying to look like mine. I stood up. I walked out of the office. I didn't tell my manager where I was going. I drove to my mother's house. Tessa's van was in the driveway. It was a Tuesday, which meant they were all there for grandma time. Another ritual where Marlene sat in her chair while Tessa stared at her phone and the kids ran wild. I walked in without knocking. The living room was a disaster zone of toys. The TV was blaring cartoons. Tessa was on the sofa, eating a bag of chips. Marlene was folding laundry. Ruby? Marlene asked, looking up. You're not working? I walked straight to Tessa. I didn't yell. I was too cold to yell. I held up my phone, showing her the PDF of the signature. What is this? I asked. Tessa looked at the screen. She blinked. She looked away, shoving a chip into her mouth. I don't know. A form? It is a financial responsibility form for Silver Pines Pediatrics. I said, it is dated 18 months ago, and it has my name signed at the bottom, but I didn't sign it. Tessa. You did. The room went quiet. The kids, sensing the tension, turned to watch. Tessa brushed crumbs off her lap. She didn't look at me. So? She said. They needed a guarantor. My credit is bad. You know that. They wouldn't see the kids unless I gave them a valid card and a guarantor. So you used my social security number? I asked. Without asking me? You would have said yes, Tessa cried, throwing her hands up. You always pay for their meds anyway. What is the difference if the bill comes in your name or if I beg you for the money later? I was saving us a step. The difference is that it is a crime. Tessa, I said. My voice rose. Just a fraction. It is fraud. You forged my signature. You opened a line of credit in my name. Oh, stop being so dramatic. Marlene cut in. She walked over, placing herself between me and Tessa. Dramatic? I looked at my mother. Mom. She stole my identity. She made sure the children could see a doctor. Marlene said sternly, it was survival. Ruby. She was desperate. A mother does what she has to do. She stole from her sister. I said, she borrowed your name, Marlene snapped, because she had no choice. Look at you, standing there in your expensive work clothes, worrying about your credit score while your sister is trying to bring a new life into the world. You have so much. Ruby, you have a career. You have freedom. You don't have a family of your own to worry about. The words hit me in the center of my chest. You don't have a family of your own. It was the ultimate dismissal, because I was single, because I was childless. I was considered a resource to be harvested, not a person to be respected. My identity, my credit, my labor, it all belonged to the real family, the one that was reproducing. I looked at Tessa. She was smirking slightly, safe behind the shield of our mother. I used it once or twice, Tessa said, shrugging. It is not a big deal. I meant to pay it. I just forgot. $420. I said, that is not once or twice. I will pay you back, Tessa yelled. When Mark gets his bonus, I will pay you back. God, you are so stingy. I looked at the children. Leo was watching me, his eyes wide and fearful. He looked like he was waiting for the explosion. I took a deep breath. I lowered my phone. I am not asking for the money. I said quietly. I turned to Marlene. And I do have a family. Mom, I have me. And I am done letting you two cannibalize me. I turned and walked out. You walk away, Marlene shouted after me. That is all you know how to do. Run back to your empty apartment. I got into my car. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't put the key in the ignition. I sat there for 5 minutes, breathing in squares. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out, 4 counts hold. I wasn't going back to work. I had one more stop to make. The administrative office of Briar Glen Elementary was painted a cheerful, buttery yellow. It smelled of laminating plastic and floor wax. I walked up to the counter. The secretary, a kind woman named Mrs. Gable with glasses on a chain, smiled at me. Hi, Miss Foster. Here to pick up Leo early? No. I said, I need to check something in the files. I explained that I was updating my contact information and wanted to see what was currently on file for all the children. Mrs. Gable, who had seen me at every school play and pickup for 5 years, didn't hesitate. She pulled the thick files from the cabinet. I opened Leo's file first. There was the emergency contact form. Primary contact, Tessa Foster. Secondary contact, Ruby Foster. But then I turned the page. There was a form titled Authorization for Release and Guardian Decision-Making. It was a standard district form allowing a non-parent to make educational decisions. Sign permission slips and access records. It was signed, Ruby Foster. It was dated 4 years ago. I turned another page. Volunteer Commitment Pledge. Signed by Ruby Foster. I opened Mia's file from the middle school. Tuition assistance application for the band trip. Listed household income included my salary. signed by Ruby Foster. I felt the floor drop out from under me. It wasn't just the clinic, it was everything. For years, Tessa had been using me not just as a backup, but as a structural pillar of her parenting facade. She had signed my name to volunteer hours I never worked. She had used my income to qualify for programs, or perhaps to show stability that she didn't have. I looked up at Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable, I said. My voice was steady, but it felt brittle as glass. I did not sign these forms. Mrs. Gable looked confused. What do you mean? Dear, you're always here. We all know you're the co-parent, aren't you? I am the aunt. I said, I am just the aunt. I looked down at the forged signature on the guardian decision-making form. It was a sloppy forgery. But no one had checked. Why would they? I was always there. My presence had validated the fraud. I need copies. I said, I need copies of every single document in these files that has my name on it. Mrs. Gable looked worried now. She glanced at the principal's closed door. Miss Foster, if there is a discrepancy. There is a discrepancy. I said, I am formally requesting copies. And I am informing you, right now, that I am removing myself as an authorized guardian effective immediately. I want to be listed as emergency contact only. No pickup authorization. No decision-making power. Mrs. Gable's mouth tightened. She realized this was trouble. I will have to get the principal. She said, get him. I said, I waited. I stood by the counter, my hand resting on the stack of files that contained the fictional version of my life that my sister had written. I was done editing. It was time to publish the corrections. As I waited, I looked at the signature on the volunteer form again. Ruby Foster. It looked so much like my name, but it wasn't. It was a ghost. And today, I was going to start exercising it. The office of the family liaison at the Briar Glen Unified School District was smaller than the principal's office, but infinitely more cluttered. It was a room where good intentions went to die under mountains of paperwork. I sat across from Mrs. Vance, a woman with kind eyes and a posture that suggested she carried the weight of 3,000 students in her shoulders. I had come here expecting a simple administrative keystroke. Delete Ruby Foster, enter Tessa Foster, done. Mrs. Vance adjusted her glasses and looked at the stack of forms I had requested. The copies of the permission slips, the emergency contacts, the volunteer pledges, and the pickup authorizations that spanned 5 years. Ms. Foster, she began, her voice gentle but firm. I understand you want to update the contact hierarchy, but you have to understand how we view stability here. I am not asking about stability. I said, I am telling you that I did not sign these forms. Mrs. Vance sighed. She tapped a finger on the guardian decision-making form. The problem, Ms. Foster, is that you have been acting in accordance with these documents for years. You attend the conferences. You pick up the children. You answer the phone when we call. In the eyes of the district, and likely in the eyes of a family court, you have established a pattern of care that supersedes the ink on the page. We cannot just remove you because you are having a dispute with your sister. I felt the blood rising in my neck. This is not a dispute. I said, this is fraud. My sister signed my name so she could avoid responsibility. If we flag this as fraud, Mrs. Vance said, lowering her voice, it triggers a mandatory review by Child Protective Services if the mother is falsifying documents to avoid truancy officers or to secure enrollment. And if the secondary guardian, that is you, abruptly withdraws, the district is obligated to assess if the children are in imminent risk of neglect. She looked at me meaningfully. Do you want to trigger that review today? I sat back in my chair. The room felt suddenly airless. If I protected myself, I endangered the kids. If I protected the kids, I remained trapped. It was the perfect cage, built by Tessa and locked by the state. I need time, I said. We can keep the file open, Mrs. Vance said. But until we have a confirmation from the biological mother or a court order, We cannot remove a primary support figure from the active roster. It is against policy to leave a gap in care. I walked out of the school with the copies of the files in my tote bag. They felt heavy, like bricks. I didn't go back to work. I sat in my car in the school parking lot and opened the next folder Mrs. Vance had given me, one I hadn't looked at closely inside. It was from the Briar Glen Family Support Office. It was an application for a childcare subsidy. I scanned the document. It was dated 2 years ago. It listed the household members: Tessa Foster, mother; Mia Foster; Leo Foster; and Ruby Foster, co-applicant. My eyes jumped to the income section. Total household income, $72,000. Tessa didn't make $72,000. Tessa made nothing. She worked sporadic shifts at a bakery and sold crafts on Etsy. The $72,000 was my salary. She had listed me as a household member, claiming we lived together, to boost the household stability score, or perhaps to qualify for a specific tier of aid that required a working adult in the home. I wasn't sure of the mechanics, but I was sure of the lie. I looked at the signature line, Ruby Foster. It wasn't just messy anymore. This wasn't just a sister taking advantage of a sister. This was theft of government funds. If the state found out she was lying about who lived in the house to get subsidies, she could go to jail. And because my name was on it, I could go with her. I started the car. My hands were gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I wanted to drive to the police station. I wanted to burn it all down. But then I saw the playground. It was recess. I saw Leo standing by the fence, kicking at the dirt. I saw the twins chasing each other near the slide. If I went to the police, where would they sleep tonight? I hated the answer. They would sleep in a foster home with strangers who didn't know that Leo needed a nightlight, or that Mia was allergic to strawberries. I pulled out of the parking lot. I wasn't going to the police, not yet. I spent the next 3 days in a fugue state of logistical warfare. I couldn't trust Tessa to handle the transition, so I had to build the bridge before I burned hers down. I called the Briar Glen Youth Club. I spoke to the director. I prepaid for 3 spots for the next month, using my credit card. I kept the receipt. I called a service called Safe Hands, a licensed nanny network. I paid a registration fee to get access to their emergency sitter database. I printed out the profiles of 3 women who lived within 5 miles of Marlene's house. I called the community resource coordinator at the library and asked for a list of free parenting support groups. I was building a safety net that didn't include my own body. Tessa, meanwhile, was vibrating on a frequency I couldn't track. On Tuesday, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find her holding a foil-wrapped plate. I made a lemon drizzle cake, she said. She looked sheepish, standing there in a loose gray sweater that hid her bump. I stared at her. You made a cake? I wanted to say thank you, she said, pushing past me into the kitchen. I know I was crazy at the coffee shop. The hormones are wild. Rubes, I didn't mean it. You do a lot for us. I know that. She set the cake on the counter. It looked lopsided and smelled of artificial lemon. I stood on the other side of the island. I didn't offer her coffee. Thank you for the cake. Tessa, I said. She looked around my clean kitchen. She ran a finger along the granite countertop. Must be nice, she said softly, to just have quiet, to have things stay where you put them. It takes work. Tessa, I said, it isn't magic. She snapped her head up, her eyes suddenly hard. The sweetness evaporated like mist. Don't lecture me, she said. You think you're better than me because you chose a spreadsheet over a life. You think you're some kind of hero because you write checks. I never said I was a hero. I said, but you act like one, she shouted. You walk around with your tight little face, judging my chaos. You love it. Ruby, you love that we need you. It makes you feel superior. If I actually got my life together, you wouldn't know who you are anymore. She stormed out, leaving the lemon cake on the counter. I threw it in the trash without unwrapping it. I went to my mother's house that Sunday for the obligatory dinner. I had to go. I needed to see the mail. I had a suspicion that more letters were coming to Marlene's address in my name. Marlene was in high spirits. She had her bridge club friends coming over the next day, and she was busy arranging flowers. I was helping her trim stems in the kitchen. You know, Mrs. Higgins asked about you, Marlene said, snipping a rose. She asked how you managed to help Tessa so much with your big job. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her that is just who you are, Marlene said proudly. I told her you are basically the kid's other mom. I said, Ruby might not have a husband, but she has raised 5 children. She beamed at me. I stopped cutting. The shears froze in my hand. You told her I was their other mom? Yes, Marlene said. It is a compliment. Ruby, it shows people that we are a close family. It shows that I raised you to step up. I looked at my mother. I saw it then. Clearly, I wasn't a person to her. I was a trophy. I was proof of her success as a matriarch. If Tessa was the fertile one, I was the responsible one, and together we made Marlene look like a grandmother who had it all covered. She was selling my servitude to her friends as a virtue. I felt a wave of nausea. I need to get some water, I said. I walked into the hallway where the mail table stood. There was a stack of envelopes. I sorted through them quickly. Marlene Foster, Tessa Foster, resident, and then a distinct envelope, Ruby Foster. But the return address wasn't a doctor or a school. It was Lakeview Horizon Credit Union. I knew Lakeview. It was a local bank. I didn't bank there. I picked up the envelope. It was thick. I tore it open right there in the hallway. Dear Ms. Foster, congratulations on the approval of your personal line of credit in the amount of $15,000. Enclosed are your checks and the repayment schedule. $15,000. The room spun. This wasn't a copay. This wasn't a permission slip. This was grand larceny. I walked back into the kitchen. I didn't care about the flowers. I didn't care about the bridge club. I held up the letter. Who opened this? I asked. My voice was very quiet. Marlene looked up. She saw the letter. She saw my face. And for the first time in my life, I saw my mother look afraid. She put down the shears. Ruby, don't make a scene, she whispered. Who opened this line of credit? I asked. Marlene wiped her hands on her apron. She looked at the door to the living room, where Tessa was watching TV. Tessa needed a bridge loan. Marlene said, just to get through the pregnancy. Mark is going to pay it off next month. Tessa can't open a loan in my name. Mom, I said, she can't do that unless someone co-signs or verifies the identity. I didn't sign this. Marlene looked down at the flowers. She picked up a carnation and started pulling the petals off, one by one. She couldn't get approved on her own. Marlene said softly, her score is too low. They said she needed a co-signer with a score over 700. So you co-signed? I asked. Marlene nodded. But the loan is in my name. Mom! I shouted. Marlene flinched. We put it in your name, she stammered. I co-signed to verify the application. I told them I was your mother and that I had power of attorney. They know me at the branch. Ruby, I've banked there for 40 years. You told them you had power of attorney? I stared at her. The betrayal was so absolute it felt like a physical blow. My mother had used her social capital at a small-town bank to help my sister steal my financial identity. I didn't think you would mind, Marlene cried, her voice rising to a wail. It is just money. Ruby, you have so much of it. Tessa was drowning. She was going to get evicted. What was I supposed to do? Let my grandchildren live on the street because you are too selfish to share your credit score? I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. I looked at her perfectly coiffed hair and her floral apron. You were supposed to protect me. I said, I am your daughter too. Marlene's face hardened. She stopped crying. Then act like a daughter, she snapped. Help your sister instead of treating us like criminals. You would have overreacted if we told you. You always overreact. We did what we had to do. I felt something snap inside me. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet sound of a tether breaking. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the vase. I simply folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I walked out of the kitchen. I walked past the living room where Tessa was laughing at a sitcom. I walked out the front door. I sat in my car. I didn't cry. I didn't feel like crying. I felt like a lawyer preparing a case. The sadness was gone. The guilt was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard geometry of survival. They weren't my family anymore. They were liabilities, and I had to liquidate them. The next morning, I called the fraud department at Lakeview Horizon Credit Union. I spoke to a fraud investigator. I gave them the details. I told them I did not open the account. I told them I did not give anyone power of attorney. I told them to freeze the funds immediately. I didn't mention Marlene's name, not yet. I just reported the fact. Unauthorized account. Then I sent a text to Tessa. Meet me at the Briar Glen Community Center. Room B. Tonight at 7. Do not bring the kids. If you don't come, the next meeting will be with a sheriff deputy. I got to the community center early. I rented room B for $20. It was a small room with fluorescent lights and a circle of folding chairs. It was neutral ground. No screaming toddlers. No mother to intervene. I set up a table. On the table, I placed 3 stacks of paper. Stack 1. The childcare schedule I had arranged with the youth club. Stack 2. The list of forged documents from the school and the clinic. Stack 3. The fraud report affidavit from the credit union. Ready for my signature. Tessa arrived at 7:15. She looked terrified. She was wearing a baggy sweatshirt and leggings. Her eyes were red. She stood in the doorway. "Are you going to arrest me?" she asked. Her voice was small. "Sit down." "Tessa," I said. She sat in the metal folding chair opposite me. She looked at the papers. "I am not going to arrest you." I said, "Not if we can agree on a plan." I pushed the first stack toward her. "This is the schedule," I said. "I have paid for the youth club for 3 months. It is done. You will pick them up by 6. If you are late, you pay the fee." She nodded, not looking at the paper. I pushed the second stack. "These are the forms you signed in my name," I said. "The school, the clinic, the subsidy office." She flinched. "And this," I said, tapping the third stack, "is the affidavit for the $15,000 line of credit you and Mom opened yesterday." Tessa put her head in her hands. She started to sob. "I didn't spend it yet," she choked out. "I swear, I just needed to know it was there. Mark isn't coming. Ruby, there is no construction job. He left 3 weeks ago. I am alone, again, and the baby is coming. And I was so scared. I watched her cry. I felt a flicker of the old pity, the old urge to jump across the table and hug her and tell her I would fix it. But then I remembered Marlene's voice. "You would have overreacted." I stayed in my chair. "I know you are scared," I said, "but your fear is not a license to destroy my life." I leaned forward. "Here is the deal. Tessa, I am not going to file this affidavit today. I am going to give you 48 hours to close that account and return the checks. If you do that, I won't press charges for the credit fraud." She looked up, hope in her wet eyes. "But," I continued, "things are going to change. I am removing myself as guardian. I am filing the paperwork with the district. I will be an emergency contact only. No pickups, no money, no signatures." Tessa's face went white. "You can't," she whispered. "I can." I said, "And I am. If you do that," she said, her voice trembling. "They will see." "Who will see?" I asked. "The school," she said. "The doctors, the social workers. If your name isn't on the paper, if it is just me, they will look at me. They will see how messy it is. They will see the missed appointments. They will see the lights getting turned off." She looked at me, and her eyes were wide with a terror that was absolute. "If you stop, Ruby, they will take them." The sentence hung in the air between us. "If you stop, they will take them." It wasn't that she needed help with the laundry. It wasn't that she needed a loan. It was that she knew, deep down, that she was failing. She knew she was drowning, and she had been using me not just as a raft, but as a decoy. I was the cardboard cutout of a responsible parent she held up to the window so the world wouldn't break down the door. She was terrified of oversight. I looked at my sister. I saw the fear. I saw the desperation. And I saw the trap. If I stayed, I enabled her dysfunction and destroyed myself. If I left, I exposed her incompetence and risked the children losing their mother. I took a breath. The air in the community center smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. "Tessa," I said, "I can't be the lie anymore. I can help you find the truth. But I won't be the lie." I pushed the affidavit toward her. "You have 48 hours to close the loan," I said, "and then we are going to the school district together. We are going to tell them the truth. Not that you are a bad mother, but that you are a single mother who needs support, not a sister to hide behind." She stared at the paper. She didn't touch it. "They won't understand," she whispered. "You don't know them. Ruby. They look for reasons to take babies away. Then we will give them reasons to let you keep them." I said, "But my name is coming off the paper." I stood up. I gathered my things. I walked out of the room. Leaving her sitting there with the 3 stacks of paper, I walked out into the cool night air of Briar Glen. I looked up at the sky. It was dark. No stars. Just the orange glow of the suburban streetlights. I knew she wouldn't do it. I knew she wouldn't close the account. I knew she wouldn't go to the district with me. She was too afraid. And that meant I was going to have to do the one thing I had promised myself I would never do. I was going to have to blow the whistle on my own family. I got into my car and locked the door. I looked at the passenger seat. It was empty. No car seats, no wrappers, just silence. I turned the key. The engine hummed. The realization that my sister was not evil, but simply incapable, hit me on a Wednesday afternoon in the fluorescent-lit waiting room of the Harborlight Family Services nonprofit. I had dragged Tessa there. Physically, practically dragged her. After the confrontation at the community center, I had spent 48 hours digging into the administrative wreckage of her life, and what I found was not a criminal enterprise, so much as a graveyard of good intentions. There were stacks of unopened mail in her car trunk. There were voicemail inboxes full of appointment reminders she had been too anxious to listen to. There were forms filled out halfway and then abandoned because she didn't know her social security number by heart and couldn't find the card. She wasn't dodging the system because she wanted to cheat it. She was dodging it because she was drowning in executive dysfunction, and shame was the water filling her lungs. At Harborlight, we sat across from a caseworker named Sarah, a woman with patience etched into the lines around her eyes. "We can offer transportation vouchers," Sarah said, typing into a clunky desktop computer, "and we have a partnership with a local pantry for diapers and formula. But Tessa, you have to do the intake interview. You have to show up." Tessa picked at the cuticle of her thumb until it bled. "I just forget things," she whispered. "I get the dates mixed up, and then I feel stupid calling back to reschedule. So I just don't." I watched her. I saw the terrified child inside the 30-year-old woman. It made my chest ache, but I forced the ache to stay small. I could not let pity become a checkbook. I stepped in. "We need a system that doesn't rely on memory." I said, "Sarah, can Harborlight send text reminders?" "Yes," Sarah said. "We can do that." "And can we set up a standing appointment for the food pantry pickup? Same day? Same time? Every week?" "We can do Tuesday mornings," Sarah said. I turned to Tessa. "Tuesday mornings," I said. "I will program it into your phone. I will write it on a calendar on your fridge. But I cannot drive you." Tessa looked up, her eyes wide. "But what if the van breaks down?" "Then you take the bus," I said. "Harborlight is giving you bus passes, but the bus takes forever." Tessa whined. "And with the kids." "Tessa," I said, my voice hard, "this is the support. This is the help. It is not a chauffeur service. It is a bus pass. You have to take it." She slumped in her chair, looking defeated. She wanted to be saved. She wanted a hero to swoop in and make the logistics vanish. She didn't want tools. She wanted magic. I drove her home in silence. When we pulled into Marlene's driveway, I turned off the engine. "Tessa," I said, "tell me about Mark." She froze. Her hand was on the door handle. "What about him? He isn't looking for a rental, is he?" She didn't answer. She stared out the window at the overgrown hydrangeas. "He came over a few times," she said, her voice barely audible. We met at the bar where I picked up those extra shifts. He was nice. He bought me a drink. He said I had pretty eyes. And the construction job? The big plans? He talks big, she said defensively. He has ideas. He moves around a lot. When was the last time you saw him? I asked. She bit her lip. 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. She was 4 months pregnant. He blocked my number, she admitted, a tear sliding down her nose. He said I was too intense. He said 5 kids was a circus he didn't want a ticket to. I closed my eyes. So the pregnancy wasn't a fresh start. I said, it was a way to keep him. No, she cried, turning to me. It wasn't like that. I thought, if we had something together, something that was just ours. She trailed off. I looked at her, and the psychology of my sister finally clicked into sharp, painful focus. She didn't love chaos because she was wild. She loved chaos because she was lonely. Chaos demanded attention. Emergencies forced people to show up. A crisis was a guarantee of company. If she was stable, if she was boring, if she was just a mom paying bills and making peanut butter sandwiches, she was afraid she would disappear. I reached out and touched her arm. He isn't coming back. Tessa, I know, she whispered. And I am not Mark. I said, I am not your husband. I am not the father of these children. You cannot replace him with me. She pulled her arm away. You are so cold, she spat. You analyze everything like it is a math problem. You don't understand love. I understand that love isn't supposed to bankrupt the people who love you. I said. She got out of the car and slammed the door. The next day, I received an email that turned my compassion back into concrete. It was an automated notification from the Briar Glen Elementary Parent-Teacher Organization. Dear Ruby, thank you so much for logging your 40 hours of volunteer service this semester. Your dedication to the library shelving project ensures that our Title I funding remains secure. Please stop by the office to pick up your appreciation certificate. I stared at the screen. 40 hours. I had never shelved a book at Briar Glen Elementary. I worked 50 hours a week at an insurance firm. I realized what had happened immediately. To qualify for the free after-school enrichment program, the fun one that included art and robotics, not just the basic care, parents had to commit to a certain number of volunteer hours. Tessa hadn't done the hours. She had simply logged into the portal, used my name, which was already in the system as a guardian, and entered the time fraudulently. She had used my identity to buy her children a privilege she wasn't willing to earn. I felt a flash of heat that started in my stomach and radiated out to my fingertips. It wasn't just the lie. It was the entitlement. She felt entitled to my name. She felt entitled to my reputation, to her. Ruby Foster wasn't a person. It was a resource, like a public utility or a trust fund. I didn't reply to the email. I printed it. I added it to the file. I sat in Dana Larkin's office again. This time, there was another woman present. A financial counselor from Redwood Path Financial Wellness named Elena. You have a mess on your hands, Elena said, looking at the credit report I had pulled. The $15,000 line of credit at Lakeview was frozen. But the inquiry was there. The pediatric bills were in collections. There was also a utility account for a cable provider that I hadn't known about. Opened 3 years ago in my name at an address I didn't live at. You have to file a police report, Dana said. She wasn't looking at me with sympathy anymore. She was looking at me with professional urgency. This isn't a family dispute. Ruby, this is identity theft. If you don't file a report, the creditors will hold you liable. You can't just say, it wasn't me, and expect them to walk away. You have to prove it was a crime. But if I file a police report, I said, Tessa could be arrested. Dana took off her glasses. Ruby, she said, she has opened 3 fraudulent accounts. She has forged your signature on federal documents for school subsidies. She is not stopping. She is escalating. If you don't draw a line that has legal consequences, she will bankrupt you. And then how will you help the children? The question hung in the air. How will you help the children? If I lost my credit, if I lost my savings, I would be useless. I was the only thing standing between those kids and the abyss. And Tessa was sawing through my legs. I will file the report for the credit accounts. I said, I will start the fraud process, but I want to give her one last chance to cure the guardianship issue voluntarily. Dana sighed. You are generous. Perhaps too generous. I am not being generous. I said, I am buying time to make sure the kids have a landing place. I spent the next hour with Elena, locking down my credit bureaus. We put a freeze on Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. We set up alerts. I changed every password I owned. I felt like I was boarding up my house before a hurricane. The hurricane made landfall 2 days later. On a Sunday, Marlene texted me, Please come over. We need to have a family meeting. Pastor John is here. I knew what it was. It was an ambush. I put on my blazer, armor. I drove to the house. The living room was set up like a tribunal. Marlene was in her armchair. Tessa was curled up on the sofa, looking small and tragic. My Aunt Linda, who had flown in from Florida presumably to witness the execution of my character, was there. And Pastor John, a man with a soft voice and soft hands, sat on a folding chair. Ruby, Marlene said, Come in, sit down. I remained standing. I'll stand. Mom, what is this? We are worried about you, Aunt Linda said. She was a woman who equated worry with control. Marlene says you are cutting Tessa off. She says you are threatening to go to the police. I am not threatening, I said. I am reporting a crime. There is a difference, Ruby, Pastor John said, leaning forward. We know you are hurt. We know money causes strife, but Scripture tells us that he who does not provide for his relatives, and especially for his own family, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. I looked at the pastor. He was quoting 1 Timothy. It was Marlene's favorite verse to bludgeon me with. Pastor, I said, does Scripture say that a sister should steal her sister's identity? Does it say she should forge signatures and lie to the government? The pastor blinked. Marlene didn't mention. She wouldn't, I said. I looked at Marlene. Mom, you called this meeting to shame me back into submission. You want me to open my wallet and shut my mouth. You want me to be the silent partner in this dysfunction. We want you to have a heart, Marlene cried. Standing up, look at your sister. She is pregnant. She is alone. And you are treating her like a stranger. I am treating her like an adult. I said. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was a breakdown of the expenses I had covered in the last 5 years. $82,000. I said. The room went silent. That is what I have paid. I said. In rent? In bills? In childcare? In bailouts? $82,000. I have provided. Pastor. I have provided until I have nothing left to give but my own name, and now she has taken that too. I looked at Tessa. She was crying silently. So here's the question. I said. I looked at Aunt Linda. I looked at the pastor. I looked at Marlene. Who is paying? I waited. If I stop, who picks up the check? Aunt Linda. Are you going to cover the rent? Pastor, is the church going to pay the $15,000 credit line Tessa opened in my name? Mom, are you going to sign the affidavit accepting liability for the fraud? Nobody spoke. Aunt Linda looked at her shoes. The pastor cleared his throat and adjusted his collar. Marlene's face turned a blotchy red. That's what I thought. I said, You are all very generous with my life. You are very righteous when it costs you nothing. I turned to Tessa. I have a proposal. I said, and it is the last one. I walked over and placed a document on the coffee table. I will remain listed as an emergency contact for 60 days. 60 days. That gives you 2 months to transfer the bills, to update the school records, and to find a new guarantor for the clinic. In exchange, you will attend the financial counseling sessions at Redwood Path that I have paid for. You will use the Harbor Light bus pass. And you will close the fraudulent account at Lakeview immediately. Tessa looked at the paper. And if I don't? She whispered. Then I file the full police report. I said, and I go to the school district and tell them everything. And I walk away. Completely. No 60 days. No transition. Just gone. Tessa looked at Marlene. Marlene looked away. The power dynamic had shifted. The money had spoken. and the money was walking out the door. "I will do it," Tessa said. "I promise. Ruby, just don't leave me. Not yet. 60 days," I said. I walked out of the house. I didn't say goodbye to the pastor. I didn't hug my mother. I felt lightheaded, like I had just defused a bomb with shaking hands. For 3 weeks, it seemed to work. Tessa went to 2 counseling appointments. She took the bus. The calls from creditors stopped coming because I had frozen everything. I started to breathe again. I started to sleep through the night. I thought, foolishly, that the contract had held. But chaos is not a choice for Tessa. It is a weather pattern, and the storm always circles back. It was a Tuesday. I had a critical presentation at Alder Creek Mutual. The regional vice president was flying in, my career, which had been stalled by my family distractions, depended on this meeting, at 9:30 in the morning. My phone buzzed. "Tessa, can't take bus. Leo threw up. Need ride to clinic." I texted back, "I am in a meeting. Call the Harbor Light van." Or call Mom. I put the phone away. I focused on the actuarial tables. I delivered my presentation. It went well. The vice president nodded. My boss smiled. At 11 o'clock, I walked back to my desk, feeling a rare moment of professional triumph. Then I saw my phone. 14 missed calls, all from my apartment complex buzz-in system, and 1 text from Tessa. "I have to work. They called me for a shift at the bakery. I can't lose this job. I left them at your place. I know you have a key under the mat. Please." Just this once, my blood ran cold. I left work. I didn't ask permission. I just ran. I drove to my apartment. I ran up the stairs. There they were, sitting in the hallway outside my door. Tessa hadn't found the key under the mat because I had removed it 3 weeks ago. Leo was sitting on his backpack, looking pale and sick. The twins were fighting over a bag of chips. The toddler, Chloe, was asleep on the doormat, her cheek pressed against the rough bristles. Mia was leaning against the wall, texting, looking bored and angry. They had been there for 2 hours, alone, in the hallway of an apartment building where anyone could have walked by. I looked at them. My heart broke, and then, instantly, it calcified. Tessa had dumped them. She had prioritized a bakery shift, a shift she probably didn't even have, or maybe she just wanted to go meet someone, over their safety. She assumed I would come. She assumed I would always come. Just this once. It was the phrase that had stolen 5 years of my life. I unlocked the door. "Come inside," I said. I ushered them in. I gave Leo a bucket and some ginger ale. I turned on the TV for the twins. I picked up Chloe and put her on my bed. Then I went into my office. I didn't call Tessa. I didn't call Marlene. I opened my laptop. I drafted a formal letter to the superintendent of the Briar Glen Unified School District. Subject: formal request for removal of guardian status and request for administrative review. I wrote it with the precision of an actuary. I listed the dates. I listed the forged documents. I listed the unauthorized volunteer hours. And then I added a line I never thought I would write. I am requesting a formal status hearing to determine the legal guardianship of these students, as the current records are fraudulent and do not reflect the reality of the household. I knew what this meant. A hearing meant social workers. A hearing meant the state would look under the hood of the foster family engine and see that it was running on fumes and lies. It meant Tessa could lose them, but she had already lost them. She had left them in a hallway. I printed the letter. I signed it. I put the kids in my car. "We are going for a ride." I said, "Where?" Mia asked, not looking up from her phone. "To your grandmother's house." I said. I drove them to Marlene's. I walked them to the door. I rang the bell until Marlene answered. "Here they are." I said. Marlene looked confused. "Ruby? Why aren't you at work?" Tessa left them in my hallway. I said, "She abandoned them." "Mom," again. I pushed the kids gently inside. "I can't watch them," Marlene protested. "I have my bridge club this afternoon." "Then you figure it out." I said, "You are the grandmother. You are the one who raised us to step up." "Step up," I turned around. "Where are you going?" Marlene screamed after me. "I am going to the school district," I said. "To do what?" "To tell the truth," I said. I got back in my car. I drove to the district office. I walked in with my letter. I handed it to Mrs. Vance. "I need to file this," I said, "and I need to schedule a hearing." Mrs. Vance looked at the letter. Her eyes widened. "Ms. Foster," she said, "once this is filed, we are legally required to open an investigation. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said. "File it." I walked out of the building. The sky was blue. The birds were singing. It was a beautiful day to blow up my life. The envelope from the Briar Glen Unified School District was thick, white, and terrified me more than any audit I had ever faced in my career as an actuary. It was not a court summons, technically. The header read, "Notice of Administrative Review, Residency and Guardianship Status Hearing." It was a bureaucratic proceeding, a meeting in a conference room with a district official, a social worker, and a recording device, but the weight of it felt criminal. I held the paper in my kitchen. The hearing was set for Thursday at 10 in the morning, for the first time in 5 years. The reality of the Foster family dynamic was going to be transcribed, dated, and filed. There would be no "just this once." There would be no guilt trips about family values. There would only be the cold, hard statutes of the Illinois State Board of Education. I felt a wave of nausea, followed immediately by a rush of dizzying relief. It was finally happening. The invisible labor I had been performing was about to become visible, simply because I had refused to do it anymore. The fallout in the days leading up to the hearing was not explosive. It was corrosive. Tessa did not scream. She disintegrated. She stopped answering my texts, but she began a campaign of psychological warfare through the children. I picked up the twins from school on Monday, one of the last pickup runs I would ever do, I reminded myself, and they climbed into the back seat with red eyes. Sophie, the older twin, wouldn't look at me. She buckled her seatbelt with aggressive silence. "Everything okay?" I asked, watching her in the rearview mirror. "Mom says you don't want us anymore," Sophie said. Her voice was small and accusing. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until the leather creaked. "Mom says you are tired of us being loud," Sophie continued. "She says you want your life back. So we have to go live with strangers if she can't figure it out." I pulled the car over. I didn't care that I was in a loading zone. I put the car in park and turned around in my seat. I looked Sophie in the eye. I looked at Sam next to her. "Listen to me," I said. My voice was steady, low, and fierce. "Your mother is upset right now because the adults are having an argument about paperwork. It is boring. Grown-up paperwork. It has nothing to do with you being loud. It has nothing to do with me wanting you. But she said you quit." Sam whispered, "I did not quit you." I said, "I quit being the person who drives the car every day. That is different. I love you. I will always be your aunt. I will always be in your life. But adults have to fix adult problems. And we are fixing them right now." Sophie sniffled. "Are we going to live with strangers?" "No," I said. "We are making a plan so that never happens." I wiped a tear from Sam's cheek. "Do not let anyone tell you that you are unwanted," I said. "Not even your mother." I drove them home. The anger in my chest was a cold, hard knot. Tessa wasn't just failing to parent. She was weaponizing their fear to punish me for my boundaries. She was willing to traumatize them to make me feel guilty. That was not love. That was hostage-taking. That night, I turned my dining room table into a command center. I wasn't building a case to destroy Tessa. I wasn't trying to get her arrested, though Dana Larkins had told me I had enough evidence to do so 3 times over. I was building a case to prove that I was not the parent. I had to prove a negative. I had to prove that I was not the person the school thought I was. I organized the documents into 3 binders. Binder 1, Financial Separation. This contained my bank statements showing the transfers I had made to Tessa versus the lack of transfers back. It showed the credit card fraud report I had filed for the Lakeview account. It showed the utility bills I had paid that were not in my name. Binder 2, The fraudulent signatures. This was the ugliest binder. It contained the side-by-side comparisons of my real signature versus the looped, childish scrawl Tessa had used on the permission slips, the medical forms, and the volunteer logs. I had circled the timestamps: March 12th, April 4th, September 9th. Dates when I was physically at my office, clocked in on the company server, while Ruby Foster was allegedly signing a release form in the school front office. Binder 3. The transition plan. This was the most important one. It was the list of the after-school programs I had prepaid, the contact info for the Safe Hands Sitter Network, the confirmation email from the neighbor, Mrs. Gable, the school secretary who lived 3 streets over, who had agreed to be an emergency contact for a small monthly fee. I looked at the binders. They were neat. They were organized. They were undeniable. I wasn't erasing Tessa. I was erasing the fictional version of Ruby she had created to cover her tracks. On Tuesday evening, Marlene came to my apartment. She didn't knock. She used the key I had hidden under the mat. I had put it back, just for emergencies. But I realized now that Marlene didn't know the definition of emergency. I was in the kitchen, making tea. Marlene walked in, shaking rain from her umbrella. She looked tired. Her usual armor of hairspray and righteousness seemed dented. "Ruby," she said, "we need to stop this." "Stop what?" I asked, leaning against the counter. "This hearing," she said. "It is embarrassing. People are talking. Mrs. Higgins asked me why the school social worker called her to verify Tessa's address. Do you know how humiliating that is? To have a social worker call my friends?" I took a sip of tea. It is a standard check. "Mom, when there is a discrepancy in the file, they verify residency. It is a witch hunt," Marlene cried. "And you started it." She reached into her purse. She pulled out an envelope. It was thick. I looked at it. "What is that?" Marlene placed the envelope on the counter. She smoothed it with her hand. "There is $2,000 in there," she said. I stared at the envelope. $2,000? "It is from my savings." She said, "I want you to take it. I want you to take it, and I want you to call the district tomorrow and tell them it was all a misunderstanding. Tell them you simply forgot you signed the forms. Tell them you are happy to remain the co-guardian." She pushed the envelope toward me. "Just keep doing what you are doing. Ruby, please, for the family. Take the money. Treat yourself to a vacation. Just make this go away." I looked at the cash. It was a bribe. My mother was trying to bribe me to accept legal liability for 5 children and a fraudulent financial history. She thought the problem was that I wasn't being paid enough. She didn't understand that the problem was that I was being consumed. I didn't touch the envelope. "I don't want your money." "Mom, everyone wants money," Marlene snapped. "Don't be a martyr. You have been complaining about the cost for years. Here is the reimbursement. Take it. It isn't about the cost," I said. "It is about the life. I want my life back. I want to date. I want to travel. I want to sleep on a Tuesday without wondering if I have to rush a child to the ER because Tessa is too overwhelmed to find the thermometer." "You are selfish," Marlene hissed. "Yes," I said. "I am. Finally." Marlene grabbed the envelope. Her face twisted into a mask of ugly, familiar rage. "You think you are so superior," she said. "You think because you have a clean apartment and a 401k that you are better than us. But you are empty. Ruby, you are cold and empty. Tessa creates life. You just manage it." The words were designed to hurt. A few years ago, they would have devastated me. Now, they just felt desperate. I opened the door. "Get out." "Mom." She left. She didn't slam the door. She closed it with a quiet final click that sounded like a vault locking. The next afternoon, I went to the school to drop off a revised contact form for the office, just to ensure they had my correct cell number for the hearing notifications. As I was walking back to my car, I heard running footsteps. "Aunt Ruby!" It was Leo. He was sprinting across the damp grass, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. I stopped. I knelt down on the pavement, ruining my pantyhose. "Hey, buddy," I said. "You're supposed to be in the bus line. I made you this," he said. breathless. He shoved a piece of folded construction paper into my hand. It was orange. It was slightly damp from his hand. I opened it. Inside, in careful, crayon letters, he had written, "Thank you for everything. For the rides. For the snacks. For being my aunt. Love, Leo." There was a drawing of a stick figure woman with brown hair holding hands with a stick figure boy. The woman was smiling. I looked at the drawing. I looked at Leo. He was watching my face, his eyes anxious, waiting to see if I liked it. "It's beautiful. Leo," I said. My voice cracked. "Mom said you were mad," he whispered, "but I told her you aren't mad at us. You just have a headache." I pulled him into a hug. I held him tight, smelling the scent of playground dirt and artificial grape juice. "I am not mad at you," I whispered into his hair. "I am never mad at you." I watched him run back to the bus line. I waved until he got on the yellow bus. Then I got into my car. I put the card on the passenger seat, and I broke. I didn't just cry, I sobbed. I bent over the steering wheel and wailed, a guttural, animal sound that I had been holding in for 5 years. I wasn't crying because I was leaving them. I was crying because Leo saw me. He saw the rides. He saw the snacks. He saw the aunt. The 7-year-old boy saw what the adults refused to see. To Marlene and Tessa, I was a utility. To the school, I was a signature. To the bank, I was a credit score. But to Leo, I was a person. And that was why I had to leave. Because if I stayed, the bitterness would eventually eat the love. If I stayed, I would eventually start resenting Leo for needing me, instead of resenting Tessa for failing him. I had to leave to save the aunt in the drawing. That evening, my phone rang. It was Tessa. I almost didn't answer, but the hearing was 12 hours away. "Hello?" I said. "Ruby?" Her voice was small, stripped of the anger and the drama. It sounded like the voice of the little sister I used to share a bunk bed with. "Yeah," I said. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know." I said. "What if they take them?" she asked. "What if I go in there tomorrow and they look at my file and they see that I'm a mess? They aren't going to take them tomorrow." "Tessa," I said, "it is an administrative hearing. They want to fix the paperwork. But the paperwork shows the truth," she said. "And the truth is, I can't do it." She started to cry. Soft, hiccuping sobs. "I can't keep track of it all. Ruby, the forms, the dates, the money. It's like noise in my head, all the time. And when you were doing it, the noise stopped. I felt safe. I listened. I felt a pang of deep, aching sympathy. I knew she wasn't lazy. I knew she likely had undiagnosed ADHD or anxiety that Marlene had dismissed as creativity her whole life. "I know." I said gently, "I know it is loud. But Tessa," I said, "you cannot use my life to silence the noise in yours." "But I'm afraid," she said. "I'm afraid they will see that I am empty, that I am just pretending to be a mother." "You are a mother," I said. "You love them. You just need systems." "Systems," she repeated, the word tasting bitter in her mouth. "I have set up systems," I said. "The youth club, the sitter list, the bus pass. They are all there. Tessa, but you have to be the one to turn the key. I can build the car, but I can't drive it for you anymore." She was silent for a long time. "Will you sit next to me?" she asked. "Tomorrow, at the table?" I closed my eyes. "Yes," I said. "I will sit next to you. But I'm telling the truth. I know," she said. She hung up. I called Dana Larkins one last time. I needed to be sure. "If I admit that the signatures are forged, but I refuse to press charges, what happens?" I asked. Dana's voice was crisp. "The district will invalidate the forms. They will strip your name from the record. They might flag the file for social services to monitor for truancy or neglect, but without a criminal complaint from you regarding the identity theft. The police likely won't get involved. The school just wants a responsible party. If Tessa steps up and signs a new guardianship affidavit, and if you present your safety net plan, They will likely accept it to avoid placing 5 kids in foster care. Foster care is expensive. The state prefers family, even messy family. So I can walk away without sending her to jail? Yes, Dana said. But Ruby? Yes? If you do this, you have to really walk away. If you bail her out one more time, the district will never believe you again. You are burning the bridge. Make sure you are on the other side. I am, I said. The morning of the hearing, I woke up at 6. I dressed in my best charcoal suit. I put on my pearls. I looked like the unshakable professional woman Marlene hated and the system respected. I drove to Marlene's house to pick up a box of old records she had texted me about. Proof. She claimed she had found that would help Tessa. I didn't believe her, but I wanted to see what she was planning. Marlene was in the kitchen, drinking coffee. She looked haggard. She pointed to a shoebox on the table. There, she said, old bank statements. From when the twins were babies. It shows I helped. It shows we are a collective. I opened the box. It was a chaotic jumble of papers. I sifted through them. Old utility bills, a few receipts for diapers, and then I saw it. It was a bank statement from 3 years ago. Marlene's account. I saw a recurring deposit, monthly, $300. The label on the transfer was Tessa, childcare. I frowned. I pulled out another statement from 2 years ago. The amount had gone up. $400. Tessa, childcare. I looked at Marlene. What is this? I asked. Holding up the statement, Marlene froze. She put her coffee cup down. What? This deposit, I said, from Tessa, labeled childcare. Marlene's eyes darted to the side. Oh, that, she said, waving a hand. That was just Tessa paying me back for things. It says childcare. Mom. I looked at the dates. These were the months when I was picking the kids up every single day. These were the months when they were at my apartment until 8 at night while Tessa worked the late shift. Tessa was paying you for childcare? I asked. My voice was very quiet. Marlene stood up, defensive. She got a subsidy, Marlene blurted out. From the state, for childcare. She had to pay a provider, so she paid me. But you didn't watch them. I said, I did. Marlene's face flushed red. I supervised, she cried. I was the grandmother. I coordinated. And besides, you didn't need the money. You had a salary. Tessa needed to cash out the subsidy to pay her rent, so she transferred it to me. And I gave it back to her, minus a little for my trouble. I stared at her. The room seemed to tilt. It was a kickback scheme. Tessa was getting state money for childcare. She was paying Marlene on paper to make it look legitimate. Marlene was keeping a cut, for her trouble, and giving the rest back to Tessa. And I was the one actually watching the children, for free. They had monetized my labor. They had turned my love into a revenue stream. I was the unpaid employee in their fraud. I felt a coldness settle over me that was so absolute it felt like peace. I put the statement in my purse. Ruby, give that back, Marlene shouted. I looked at her. No, I said, this goes in the binder. I walked out of the house. Marlene was screaming my name from the porch. I got into my car. I placed the binder on the passenger seat next to Leo's card. I drove to the district office. I parked the car. I checked my makeup in the mirror. I looked calm. I looked capable. I looked like a woman who was done. I walked into the building. Tessa was waiting in the lobby. She looked pale and sick. She was twisting a tissue in her hands. Ruby, she whispered when she saw me. I didn't hug her. I didn't smile. Let's go, I said. We walked into the conference room together. The hearing officer was there. Mrs. Vance was there. A recording device sat on the table with a red light blinking. The officer looked up. State your names for the record, he said. Tessa's voice trembled. Tessa Foster. Mother. I took a breath. Ruby Foster, I said, and then I opened my binder. The conference room at the Briar Glen Unified School District Administrative Office was a windowless box painted a shade of beige that felt aggressively neutral. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. At the center of the room was a long laminate table that seemed to stretch out like a battlefield. I sat on one side. my hands folded on top of my 3 binders. My posture was rigid. I was wearing my charcoal suit, the one I wore when I had to present bad news to corporate executives. It was my armor. On the other side of the table sat Tessa and Marlene. Tessa was weeping softly into a tissue, her shoulders shaking in a performance of fragility that I knew well. She wore a loose, floral dress that emphasized her pregnancy, projecting the image of the vulnerable, expectant mother. Marlene sat next to her, stone-faced, clutching her purse as if she expected someone to try and snatch it. At the head of the table sat Mr. Henderson, the district's compliance officer, a man with a bald head and glasses that slid down his nose. Next to him was Mrs. Vance, the family liaison, and a woman I didn't know, who introduced herself as Ms. Clark from the county's social services department. The presence of the third woman changed the temperature in the room. This wasn't just a meeting about paperwork anymore. It was an assessment of fitness. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. He pressed a button on the digital recorder in the center of the table. A small red light blinked on. "This is a residency and guardianship status hearing regarding the foster children," he said. His voice was dry and devoid of emotion. "We are here to clarify the primary responsible party and to address discrepancies in the district's records." He looked at Tessa. "Ms. Foster, you are the biological mother?" "Yes," Tessa whispered. She wiped her eyes. "I am. And I just want to say, I know things have been messy. I know that, but we are a close family. My sister, she helps me. We are a village." She looked at me with tear-filled eyes, pleading for me to pick up the cue. "Ruby has been so involved," Tessa continued. "She is basically a second parent. She is stressed right now because of her job, but she loves these kids. We have always shared the load. That is what sisters do." It was a good speech. It was the speech Marlene had coached her to give. It framed my boundaries as a temporary mood swing caused by work stress, rather than a structural rejection of their exploitation. "Mr. Henderson turned to me. "Miss Foster, do you agree with this characterization? Do you accept the designation of co-guardian and the responsibilities that come with it?" The room went silent. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning vent. I could hear Marlene's heavy breathing. I opened the first binder. The snap of the metal ring sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "No," I said. "I do not," Marlene gasped. Tessa flinched as if I had slapped her. I spoke clearly, keeping my voice pitched low. I did not look at my family. I looked at Mr. Henderson. "I love my nieces and nephews." I said, "I have spent the last 5 years ensuring they are fed, clothed, and educated, but I am not their parent, and I am not their guardian. The records that list me as such are fraudulent." "Fraudulent is a strong word." "Ms. Foster," Mr. Henderson said, narrowing his eyes. "It is the accurate word," I said. I slid the binder across the table. "Tab A," I said. "These are the pickup authorization forms from the last 3 years. Tab B contains the volunteer hour logs. Tab C contains the medical release form signed at the school nurse's office." Mr. Henderson opened the binder. He flipped through the pages. I pointed to a specific document. "Please look at the signature dated October 4th of last year." I said, "That is a signature authorizing a field trip. It is signed Ruby Foster." Mr. Henderson looked at it. "Now," I said, sliding a second document across the table. "This is my notarized affidavit of identity, along with a copy of my driver's license and my employee time card from Alder Creek Mutual for that same date." I waited while he compared them. "On October 4th, I said, "I was in a compliance meeting in Chicago from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening. I was 40 miles away. I could not have signed that form in the Briar Glen front office at 2 in the afternoon, and if you look at the handwriting, you will see that the loop on the R and the slant of the F do not match my legal signature." Mr. Henderson looked closer. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at the notarized signature, sharp and angular. He looked at the school form, loopy and round. He looked up at Tessa. "Ms. Foster," he said, "did you sign your sister's name to this document?" Tessa froze. She looked at Marlene for help. It was a misunderstanding, Marlene blurted out. She leaned forward, her face flushing red. Ruby gave her permission. It is a verbal proxy. We are family. We don't stand on ceremony about who holds the pen. Mr. Henderson turned his gaze to Marlene. It was a cold, bureaucratic stare that had no patience for matriarchal bullying. Mrs. Foster, he said, there is no such thing as a verbal proxy for legal guardianship in a public school district. We require accurate records for the safety of the children. If a child is injured and we call a person who is 40 miles away because we believe she is the primary contact, that is a liability. But she is their aunt, Marlene argued. She pays for everything anyway. That brings me to the second point. I interrupted. I opened the second binder. I am not disputing that I have paid. I said, I have paid $82,000 in the last 5 years. I listed every expense in this ledger. But paying for a child does not make me the parent of that child. It makes me a donor. And I am closing the donation window. I looked at Ms. Clark, the social worker. I am removing myself from the financial equation because my identity has been used to secure credit and subsidies without my consent. I cannot be the safety net if the safety net is being dismantled by theft. Tessa let out a sob. It was a raw, ugly sound. I had to, she cried out. We all turned to look at her. The mask had cracked. I had to use your name, she yelled, shaking. Because when I go in there, when I go into the office with my name, they look at me like I am trash. They look at my credit score. They look at the different last names of the kids. They judge me. She looked at Mr. Henderson, tears streaming down her face. But when I wrote, Ruby Foster, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. When I used her email, everyone was so nice. They approved the applications. They let the kids into the good programs. No one asked questions. I just wanted them to have what the normal kids have. I used her name as a shield. The silence that followed was heavy. She had admitted it. She hadn't done it just for money. She had done it because she knew that in the eyes of the system, I was a valid person and she was a statistic. She had worn my skin to get respect. I felt a pang of sorrow, but I pushed it down. Understanding the motive did not change the crime. Ms. Clark, the social worker, made a note on her pad. Ms. Foster. Ms. Clark said to Tessa, I understand that you felt marginalized, but misrepresenting the legal guardianship status puts your children at risk. If there is an emergency, we need to know who is actually responsible. She looked at me. Ms. Ruby Foster, she said, if we remove you from the file today, and if the mother is unable to meet the financial and logistical requirements of the district, are you aware that this could trigger a placement review? She was asking if I was willing to let them go into foster care. It was the question that had held me hostage for 5 years. I took a breath. I reached for the third binder. I am aware, I said, and that is why I have arranged a transition plan. I opened the binder. I laid out the documents. I have prepaid the Briar Glen Youth Club for the next 90 days. I said, that provides licensed childcare until 6 in the evening. I have registered the family with the Safe Hands Sitter Network and paid the membership fee for the year. I have spoken to Mrs. Gable, the school secretary who lives on Elm Street, and she has agreed to be the listed emergency contact for neighborhood pickups for a monthly stipend, which I have covered for 6 months. I looked at Tessa. The infrastructure is there. I said, the bills are paid for the immediate future. The kids do not need to be removed. They have a safe place to go. But Tessa has to be the one to sign them out. Tessa has to be the one to manage the schedule. I have built the boat, but I will not row it. Mr. Henderson looked at the plan. He looked at the receipts. He looked at the confirmation letters. He looked at me with a strange expression. It was respect. This is thorough, he said. It is necessary, I said. Mr. Henderson turned to Tessa. Mrs. Foster, he said, the district is willing to accept this transition plan. We will update the records to list you as the sole guardian. We will remove your sister's name from all liability forms. Tessa nodded, wiping her face. However, he added, his voice hardening. Because of the admission of falsified documents, we are requiring a formal compliance agreement. You will be required to attend a weekly intake meeting with Ms. Clark for the next 6 months to ensure the household remains stable. You must update your contact information immediately. If there is a lapse in pickup or a failure to communicate, we will not call your sister. We will call Child Protective Services. Do you understand? Tessa looked terrified, but she also looked, for the first time, like she was being seen. There was no place to hide, no sister to blame. I understand, she whispered. Good, mister, Henderson said. He clicked off the recorder. The hearing was over. We walked out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Marlene was vibrating with rage. She waited until the door to the conference room clicked shut. And then she turned on me. I hope you are happy, she hissed. Her face was contorted. You humiliated your sister. You humiliated me. You aired our dirty laundry in front of strangers. It wasn't dirty laundry. Mom, I said, it was the truth. You ruined this family, she shouted. She didn't care who heard. You cold-hearted, selfish witch. You think you can just buy your way out of loyalty? You think those receipts make you a good person? They make you a monster. You abandoned those babies. Tessa was standing by the wall, looking at the floor. She looked exhausted. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had taught me that love was a transaction where I paid and she collected. I reached into my purse. I pulled out the folded bank statement I had taken from the shoebox in her kitchen. I unfolded it. I held it up. Marlene, I said. She stopped shouting. She saw the paper. Her eyes went wide. What about the transfers? Mom? I asked calmly. She froze. $300 a month. I read, Tessa, childcare, for 3 years. I took a step closer to her. You were taking money from the state subsidy that was meant for watching the kids. I said, but you weren't watching them. I was leaving work early. I was canceling dates. I was losing sleep. And you were cashing the checks. Marlene's mouth opened and closed. She looked around the hallway to see if anyone was listening. That was for expenses, she stammered. Her voice had lost all its power. It was barely a squeak. You profited off my labor. I said, you guilt-tripped me into doing the work for free, while you pocketed the pay. You aren't angry because I ruined the family. Mom, you are angry because I stopped the cash flow. Marlene turned pale. She looked at Tessa, but Tessa wouldn't meet her eyes. Tessa knew. They both knew. They had been partners in the grift. I crumpled the paper and dropped it at Marlene's feet. Don't ever call me selfish again, I said. Marlene stared at the ball of paper on the linoleum. She didn't speak. She looked small. She looked like a thief who had been caught in the daylight. I turned to Tessa. She was hugging her stomach. She looked at me with eyes that were sad and frightened, but clear. Ruby, she said. I didn't let her apologize. Apologies were easy. I wanted change. I reached into my inner blazer pocket and pulled out a sealed white envelope. I held it out to her. What is this? She asked. I explained the contents. Inside is the application for the county's actual child care assistance program, the one you qualify for on your own, without my income. I said, I have filled out the hard parts. You just need to sign it. There is also a gift card for the grocery store. It is enough for 2 weeks. She took the envelope. Her hands were shaking. And there is a note. I said, read it when you get home. I looked at my sister. I saw the resemblance between us, the same nose, the same chin, but we were different species now. She was a creature of chaos, and I was a creature of order. We could love each other, but we could not live in the same cage. You can do this. Tessa, I said, but you have to do it. I walked past them. I walked down the long hallway of the district office. I pushed open the double glass doors and stepped out into the parking lot. The sun was blindingly bright. The air smelled of wet asphalt and freedom. I walked to my car. I got in. I sat in the silence. It was over. The folder in my mind labeled the foster family crisis was closed. I thought about Leo. I thought about the card he had made me. Thank you for the snacks. I would still see them. I would still pick them up on Saturdays for ice cream. I would still be their aunt. But I would be the aunt who visited, not the aunt who survived them. I started the engine. I put the car in reverse. For the first time in 5 years. I didn't check my phone to see if anyone needed me. I just drove. And as I turned onto the main road, leaving the school district behind me, I realized that the silence in the car wasn't empty. It was full. It was full of my own life, waiting to be lived. I merged into traffic, and I didn't look back. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a long journey for Ruby, but she finally found the strength to set the boundaries she needed. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more dramas about family, betrayal, and justice, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. Share your thoughts in English. Do you think Ruby did the right thing by walking away? Or was she too hard on her sister? I read every comment, and I can't wait to hear what you think. Until next time.